Right now, somewhere in your house, there is a small orange bottle. It has a label, it has a dosage, it has a child-proof cap. You barely think about it. You twist it open, you swallow 2 pills, and in 20 minutes your headache is gone. But for almost the entire history of your species, that bottle did not exist. No pills, no dosage charts, no pharmacy on the corner. And yet your ancestors broke bones. They gave birth. They pulled teeth out of each other's jaws with their bare hands. So how did they survive the pain? The real answer is far stranger than you think. Your body was built with its own pharmacy. It has been running inside you this entire time. You just never had to notice it because modern medicine got there first. It is easy to imagine the past as helpless, a world without relief, where every injury simply had to be endured in raw, unfiltered agony. That picture feels intuitive. It is also almost completely wrong. Your ancestors were not victims of their own biology. They were the first people to ever study it, using nothing but observation, memory, and trial across thousands of generations. They just never wrote the results down in a journal. They wrote them into ritual, into habit, into the plants they reached for without a second thought. Go back 100,000 years. A woman is giving birth in a cave. There is no epidural. There is no doctor. There is only firelight and pain and the people around her. And somehow she survives it. So does the man dragged off a cliff edge by a spear wound. So does the child with a broken arm, screaming, then quiet, then walking again, weeks later. Pain did not disappear for these people. It was managed quietly, biologically, and sometimes with plants pulled straight from the dirt. Here is the first secret. Your brain manufactures its own opioids. They are called endorphins, and the word literally means morphine within. In 1973, a young researcher named Candace Pert, working alongside Solomon Snyder at Johns Hopkins, discovered something remarkable. She found opioid receptors sitting inside the human brain, not put there by drugs, already there, waiting. Your brain had built landing pads for painkillers before painkillers ever existed. Why would evolution do that? Because pain, left completely unchecked, is not useful. It is paralyzing. A wounded human who cannot move, cannot hunt, cannot flee, cannot protect their child. So the body built a release valve. Intense exertion, injury, even fear itself can trigger a flood of endorphins strong enough to dull agony in real time. Soldiers shot in battle have reported feeling almost nothing until hours later. Marathon runners hit a wall of pain, and then strangely, it lifts. That lift is not imagination, it is chemistry. Ancient humans running from a predator, fighting off an attacker, or crawling home with a broken leg were flooded with the same internal chemical shield. Their body already knew what to do. It just needed the emergency to trigger it. But endorphins alone could not carry a species through childbirth, infection, and violence for 200,000 years. There had to be more, and there was. In 2012, an archaeologist named Karen Hardy examined something almost nobody had thought to look at closely: Neanderthal teeth. Buried in the hardened plaque on those ancient teeth, she found microscopic traces of plants. Not food scraps, medicine, chamomile, yarrow, bitter-tasting plants with almost no nutritional value. Plants a hungry animal would normally avoid. So why eat something bitter and useless for calories? Because Neanderthals were not eating them for food. They were eating them for relief. Chamomile calms inflammation. Yarrow slows bleeding and eases pain. These are not modern discoveries dressed up as ancient ones. These are compounds still studied today for the exact same properties. A Neanderthal chewing yarrow beside a dying fire 60,000 years before agriculture was doing something startlingly similar to reaching for a home remedy tonight. The body hurt. The brain remembered the plant. The plant helped, and that memory got passed down generation after generation long before anyone could write it down. Willow bark tells an even sharper story. For thousands of years, across separate cultures on separate continents, people independently discovered the same thing: chew the bark of a willow tree or boil it into tea. And pain fades, fevers break, swelling goes down. Ancient Sumerian tablets record it, Egyptian medical papyri record it, and centuries later, chemists finally isolated the compound responsible: salicin, the same molecule your body converts into salicylic acid, the same family of compound eventually refined into aspirin. Your ancestors did not know the chemistry. They did not need to. They only needed the pattern. Chew this, feel less pain, repeat. And willow bark was never alone. Across the ancient world, entire regions built their own separate pharmacies out of whatever grew nearby. In the hills of Mesopotamia, poppy seed pods were scored open and their sap collected, dried, and used to dull the worst pain a body could feel. Sumerian tablets even labeled the poppy the joy plant, a name that survives in fragments of clay thousands of years old. In the Andes, coca leaves were chewed by workers and warriors alike, not for pleasure, but because the leaves numbed the mouth, eased hunger, and blunted exhaustion at extreme altitude. In parts of ancient China, acupuncture needles were pressed into the skin at precise points, and pain remarkably receded. Nobody involved understood endorphins. Nobody understood nerve pathways. But every one of these cultures independently arrived at a version of the same discovery. The body has switches, and if you know where to press, where to cut, or what to chew, you can flip them. Even surgery existed without anesthesia as you know it, and it is more unsettling than you might expect. Archaeologists have found ancient skulls, some more than 7,000 years old, with clean, deliberate holes cut into the bone. This practice is called tree panning, and for a long time researchers assumed it was purely ritual, a way to release evil spirits. But the edges of many of these holes show something else: healing, regrowth, which means the person survived the operation, sometimes by years. Whoever performed that surgery had to manage pain and bleeding well enough to keep a fully conscious human still while cutting through their skull. Some evidence points to intoxicating plants, tightly controlled bleeding, and something else almost impossible to measure today: trust. A patient held down gently, spoken to calmly, distracted on purpose. Calming a mind, it turns out, has always been part of managing a body's pain. But knowing a plant works is different from understanding why pain exists in the first place. And that question stayed unanswered for a very long time. For centuries, pain was treated like a simple alarm bell. Damage the body, ring the bell, feel the pain. Simple cause, simple effect. Then in 1965, two researchers, Ronald Melzack and Patrick Wall, published something called the gate control theory of pain. It rewired how we understand suffering itself. Pain, they argued, is not a fixed signal traveling straight from wound to brain. It passes through a kind of gate in the spinal cord, and that gate can be opened wider or closed almost shut depending on other signals arriving at the same time. Rubbing an injury, pressing against it, focusing intensely on something else entirely. All of these can partially close that gate. Suddenly, ancient behavior made sense in a completely new way. Why did wounded warriors grip and press their own injuries? Why did mothers rock in rhythm through labor? Why did healers press heated stones against aching backs? None of them had ever heard of a spinal gate, but their bodies had already found it. Through trial, through instinct, through generations of watching what worked and repeating it. Cold water numbed a wound long before anyone understood nerve conduction. Tight binding on a break reduced movement and reduced agony, long before anyone diagrammed a gate in the spine. Rhythmic breathing during childbirth was not superstition. It was pain gating, performed by instinct thousands of years before a laboratory gave it a name. Think about childbirth again, because it may be the clearest example of all. Across nearly every ancient culture on record, women in labor were surrounded, not left alone in silence, but held, chanted to, walked alongside, and pressed against. Midwives in ancient Egypt used counter pressure on the lower back during contractions. Traditional birth attendants across the Americas encouraged squatting positions and steady rhythmic movement rather than stillness. None of these women had access to a single modern drug, and yet the instinct to move, to be touched, to focus on breath and rhythm instead of the wound itself appears again and again across cultures that never had contact with one another. That is not a coincidence. That is the same spinal gate, discovered independently over and over, by bodies doing what bodies have always done under pressure. Now think about what this means for you. You live in a body built by the same pressures that shaped every ancestor who came before you. The chemistry has not changed. Your endorphins still surge under stress. Your spinal gate still opens and closes with every distraction, every touch, every breath you control on purpose. When you press a hand against a stubbed toe, when you grip an ice pack, when you breathe slowly through a sharp pain instead of tensing against it, you are not doing something modern. You are doing something ancient. You are running software written for a body without pharmacies, without hospitals, without a single pill. The bottle in your medicine cabinet did not replace your biology. It layered on top of it. Underneath every dose of relief you take today, the same ancient machinery is still quietly running. The endorphins Candace Pert found waiting in the brain. The plant knowledge etched into Neanderthal teeth. The gate Melzack and Wall finally explained on paper, after your ancestors had already been closing it shut with nothing but touch and rhythm for 100,000 years. So the next time pain hits you and your hand moves instinctively to press, to rub, to breathe slower, remember what is actually happening. You are not helpless without a pill. You never were. Somewhere behind that instinct is a woman in a cave, a Neanderthal chewing bitter yarrow beside a fire, a healer pressing heated stone into an aching back. They did not have your orange bottle, but they had you, or rather you have them, running quietly inside every reflex your body still remembers how to use.